This is Professor Cruz. Welcome to week 7 of World Cultural Geography. Our topic this week is language. Language is an important element of our culture that people value. Individually and collectively, people are passionate about their native language, especially if they think it's going to be threatened in some way. The distribution of languages represents cultural diversity, with about 7,000 languages spoken globally. About half of these languages are classified as endangered, and approximately 85 languages are spoken by at least 10 million people. And another 300 languages are spoken by between 1 million and 10 million people. Each year, about 25 languages become extinct. According to Deblay, by the end of the 21st century, the number of languages may be depleted to just a few hundred. So billions of the world's people will no longer be speaking their mother tongues. As the United States is a nation of immigrants, think about the landscape and its effect. Think about language and its effect on the local, national, and global cultural landscape. Our questions for consideration this week: where are languages distributed? Why is English related to other languages? Why do individual languages vary among places? Is an international language needed? And what is the place of English in the world? So we'll start our discussion about language in the United States. Other than English, which is the most commonly spoken language at home, Spanish is the second most commonly spoken language at home, and that is the second most commonly spoken language in 41 states. This map shows the other most commonly spoken languages, and I thought it would be much more interesting because it's much more diverse. German dominates the Midwest regions, and then we have a spattering of Native American languages spoken in selected states such as South Dakota, Arizona, New Mexico, and Alaska. Asian languages are more prevalent in the western states as well as in some of the central states like Iowa, Oklahoma, and Texas. And then French we see in pink, which is more dominant on the East Coast and in the South. Language is the main means by which belief systems, customs, and skills pass from one generation to the next. And in most countries have designated at least one official language to be used for official documents and public objects such as road signs, money, and stamps. Many countries have more than one official language and require all public documents to be in all languages. In Switzerland, there are 4 official languages, and this photo shows the 4 languages on the top. And this photo is a sign that prevents hikers, vehicles, and horses from entering the forest because of timber cutting. German is on the top left, French is on the top right, Italian lower left, and Romanish, which is the lower right. And the placement of these languages is similar to the geographic distribution of the languages in the country of Switzerland. And so what we see here on the map are the language of Switzerland. And so the country is shown in purple, yellow, orange, and green, which reflect the 4 languages. Those are surrounded by the countries where those languages are predominantly spoken: Germany, France, Italy, and Austria. So you see, for example, that in the purple we have French is spoken in Switzerland, and that's connected to France, which is in the northwest of Switzerland. Germany is north of Switzerland, and German is the predominant language spoken in Switzerland. There's Italian to the south, where Italy is the country to the south, and Romansh, which is only spoken by 1% of the nation's people, is a language spoken by the people that came from Romania. So we'll go back to the United States and talk about the official language. Most people assume that English is the official language of the United States, as the United States is one of the major centers of commerce and trade in the world, and it is a major English speaking country. In fact, there is no law proclaiming English as the official language of the United States. There have been many efforts to pass legislation to amend the U.S. Constitution to adopt English as the official language, but none have been successful. The Language Unity Act continues to be introduced to Congress each year. This act would establish English as the official language of the United States. As stated earlier, the United States is a nation of immigrants. When I walk through my neighborhood, I am likely to hear Spanish, Vietnamese, and English in a variety of accents and dialects. In its early days as a colony, one walking in the United States could hear German, Dutch, French, and a multitude of Native American language spoken alongside English. While there is no federal English only law, many states have adopted English only legislation. This map shows the states that have adopted official English only laws. There are 27 states in the United States with official English laws, and Oklahoma was the most recent state to adopt such a law in 2010. Moving from the United States to the world, this is a simplified version of the map in your textbook that shows the distribution of language families. There is no scholarly agreement on all of the language families. However, there is agreement that the most widespread language family is Indo-European. Nearly half of the world speaks one of the Indo-European languages, and this language on the map is represented in light green. And the Indo-European languages include English, German, Spanish, French, Russian, Portuguese, Hindi, and Bengali. So it's a lot of different languages. The second largest language family, which is shown on the map in gold color, is Sino-Tibetan, which includes Mandarin, which is spoken in China, and that's the world's single most spoken language. Some people would suggest that Afro-Asiatic languages are the third major family. This group consists of two major divisions, Semitic and Hamitic. The Semitic languages cover the area from the Arabian Peninsula, where Saudi Arabia is located, and the Tigris-Euphrates River Valley of Iraq, westward through through Syria and North Africa to the Atlantic Ocean. So that is represented in the red color on the map. Arabic is the most widespread Semitic language of this group, and the Hamitic languages are spoken by people of North and East Africa. African languages are also called Niger Congo in your text, and they're listed as African, which is in a light green or teal color on your map. And they are considered the most popular in Africa because Swahili is included in this group, and Swahili is spoken by many Africans as a second language. The history of the English language really started with the arrival of three Germanic tribes who invaded Britain during the 5th century AD. These tribes, the Angles, the Saxons, and the Jutes, crossed the North Sea from what today is Denmark and northern Germany. At that time, the inhabitants of Britain spoke a Celtic language, but most of the Celtic speakers were pushed west and north by the invaders, mainly into what is now Wales, Scotland, and Ireland. The Angles came from England, and their language was called Englisk, from the words England and English, from which the words England and English were derived. Later, Vikings from present-day Norway and Normans further transformed the English language. So we have later 9th century invasions from the Vikings and 11th century invasions from the Normans. The Normans were from present-day France and actually changed England's official language to French for 300 years. Remnants of French remain in the English language today. English language diffused through relocation diffusion as it migrated with the people of England when they established colonies over 4 centuries. English is the official language in most former British colonies. It's the de facto official language in the United States, even though it's not the official language. Some Caribbean islands, India, Australia, New Zealand, and other countries. The first successful English colony in the United States was established in Jamestown, Virginia in 1607. And the United States is responsible for diffusing English to other nations, including the Philippines, which was once a U.S. colony. Mutually understandable yet different through variations in vocabulary, spelling, and pronunciation, dialects often form when groups are separated from one another. Every word that is not used nationally has some geographic extent within the country and therefore has usage boundaries. These word boundaries are known as isogloss. The English dialect spoken by the first colonists determined the future speech patterns for their communities because later immigrants adopted the languages used in their new homes when they arrived. The original settlements by the early colonists can be broken down into three dialect regions: New England, Southeastern, and the Midlands. New England was inhabited by settlers from England. The Southeastern immigrants largely came from Southeastern England, with others representing a diversity of social and class backgrounds. The immigrants from the Midlands were the most diverse group. They included the Quakers from North England, Scots and Irish, German, Dutch, and Swedes. The dialects from the Southeast and New England are easily recognizable. Dialects differences tend to be the greatest in rural areas because people living in rural areas have little interaction with people from other dialect regions. A fourth major dialect has developed in the West. The standard pronunciation throughout the American West comes from the Midlands rather than the New England and the southeastern regions of the United States, and this pattern occurred because most of the Western settlers came from the Midlands. Mass media has reduced the number of regionally distinctive words, but we still hear remnants of many words in social media and in our cultural language day to day. So, for example, some people refer to groups of people as you guys, y'all, or you all. Which form do you use? Most words that are specific to dialect pertain to rural life, food, or objects from daily activities. And at the end of this video, I'm going to have you all take a test to determine which language group you're a part of, which language dialect you're a part of. In the United Kingdom, the dialect of English that is considered standard is called British Received Pronunciation, or BRP. It was used by upper-class residents in London, Cambridge, and Oxford. Since Cambridge and Oxford are university cities, the dictionaries printed in the 18th century used BRP, or British Received Pronunciation. This dialect is of the upper classes, was called the King's English, as it was the English spoken by well-educated people around England. Like the United States, strong regional differences persist in dialects in England, especially in rural areas. The dialects can be grouped into three main ones: Northern, Midland, and Southern. The Southern dialects can be broken into two subdialects. English in the United States evolved independently in the 18th and 19th centuries with little influence on one another. U.S. dialect differs from the English dialect of England in three significant ways: vocabulary, spelling, and pronunciation. Settlers in America encountered many new objects and experiences not present in England. Climate and geography also differ significantly between England and America. And so this may be the reason for some of the differences that are shown on the chart on the slide, with examples of British and American English. Another example that is not included there is the word for truck. Americans say truck, British say lorry. This is a word that was not developed when the Americans came over across when the people who migrated to America crossed the Atlantic in the 17th century. For spelling, Noah Webster of Webster's Dictionary sought to make English used in America distinct from England to reduce the cultural differences and the cultural dependence. And so he changed the spellings of some words in the dictionary. The chief cause of pronunciation differences was limited interaction between the speakers of varying dialects. So there was limited interaction within the United States, and then there was also isolation caused by the separation of the Atlantic Ocean, which allowed the two languages to develop independently. Also, was limited travel and communications. Few people traveled between the U.S. and England during the 18th and 19th centuries, and no form of communication that transmitted voices across the ocean existed at that time. So pronunciation of words developed independently. English is the language of international communication, which is also known as lingua franca. A lingua franca is an existing, well-established language of communication and commerce used widely where it is not the mother tongue. English is the first language for over 350 million people. It is spoken fluently by up to 1 million others. It is the official language in 57 countries. And people in smaller countries need to learn English to fully participate in the global economy. Some speakers of other languages speak a pidgin language, which is a form of speech that adopts a simplified grammar and a limited vocabulary of a lingua franca. A pidgin language is used among speakers of two different languages. English is the first language used for 350 million speakers. It's spoken fluently by an additional 1/2 to 1 billion others, and it's the official language in 57 nations. Others learn to speak English so that they can participate in the global village. So perhaps a quarter of the global population can communicate in English. This map shows the countries where English is the official language either by law or by practice. In the dark blue nations, it's the official language, except in the United States, we know it's not official, but it's the de facto official language. The light blue colored nations are those where English is widely spoken and understood. According to some scholars, about a quarter of the world's population can communicate in English. It is a common language for science, air traffic control, the global jihad, and the internet. All of the world's top business schools now teach in English. The U.S. also, through popular culture, transmits English to the world through popular music, movies, and American television series. There may be more native speakers of Chinese, Spanish, or Hindi, but English is spoken when people need to talk across cultures. Historically, the lingua franca was the language of the group in power. Latin was the lingua franca during the reign of the Roman Empire and the most influential language for over 1,000 years. Now Latin is only spoken by priests and scholars. Mandarin Chinese may be spoken by most people in the world, as China is the most populous nation. However, there are many dialects of Mandarin that are not universally understood within China, so they do not actually speak or read a common language. Although groups outside of China don't learn Chinese on a large scale. During the colonization race of the late 1800s, the French Empire grew to Africa and Southeast Asia. But English, not French, became the language of globalization in the 20th century. Why? Why did English become the most popular language? The role of the United States during World War II perhaps sealed the role of English as the global language of the 20th and early 21st century, as English has become one of the dominant nations for the economy, for governance, for leadership, and for popular culture. One of the places where popular culture is exchanged is on the internet. This graph shows the top 10 languages in the internet as of 2013. English has been the most important language on the internet through its history. Many non English speakers have had difficulties with the internet because the United States created the English language nomenclature for the internet that the rest of the world has followed. As more users from more countries gain internet access, the balance is shifting so that English is no longer as important. Mandarin will probably replace English as the most frequently used online language before 2020. The United States, and therefore English, has been the dominant economic, scientific, and social culture. Will English's role as the dominant global language continue, or will changes in population growth, fluctuations in the economy, and other global forces contribute to another language displacing English as the lingua franca? This has been a short introduction to language to help us consider our discussion of English as the lingua franca. Next week, we will tackle religion. So, as you move throughout space this week, begin to consider which regions dominate the world map and how does religion shape the cultural landscape.